All right, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. You've kind of already been informally introduced to us, but I'll do it more formally. I'm Erin from Scismic. I'm going to be leading the presentation, and Beth is with me here as well. She's going to be monitoring the chat and helping run the Q&A at the end. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is the third of a four-part series we're running in January on different kind of tools that are useful for STEM job seekers to be familiar with. The first 2 weeks we did resume and LinkedIn. The last week we are going to be doing interviews. And even if you're not yet to the stage yet where you're interviewing for roles, I think that's still going to be a really fun, interesting presentation with a lot of things that you can take away, even for preparing for a public speaking, a presentation in an academic setting, and then will also be useful when you move into interviewing for roles. And certainly very useful if you are currently at that stage. But today, we are going to be focusing on Scismic's own platform. I'm going to go through essentially the different sections that you want to pay attention to and a little bit about how it intersects with industry knowledge. I'm going to try to drop in a lot of kind of insider things about industry and how to look for roles based on how the platform is structured as well. So for today, we're going to go through the presentation portion. It should take about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit less. And then we're going to have an optional Q&A. If you don't have any questions, you don't need to feel like you need to stick around for the Q&A, but we do want to make sure that we have time to answer everyone's questions who attend today. And I know, especially with filling out the profile, as I'll get into, it's going to require a lot of personal information, a lot of thinking about the kind of roles you want. And so if you'd like to follow up with us later, we're going to have emails that you can contact us with if you'd like a little bit more time than a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So moving into the presentation proper, I think that the first big question is, what is Scismic? And Scismic was started as a resource for talent matching built by scientists. Danica and Elizabeth are our two co-founders. And the idea they had was that a lot of scientists are coming out of academia with a lot of really useful skills, a lot of important bench skills, a lot of important non-bench skills like programming skills, data analysis skills, but they're not easily finding roles in industry, even though their skills are highly applicable. And so the idea was set up a system that's based on skills and experience matching that takes all of the skills and experience that you've worked so hard to build over the years into account. And if you find a role that's looking for that skills and experience, you're going to feel more fulfilled in the role because you know that what you bring to the table is being valued, and you're going to be more prepared to contribute to the innovation in the science industry that we all love, regardless of the sector of science. But it's also grown beyond that. So we like to think of ourselves as a matchmaker, but also a guide. As I've touched on already, the algorithm for matching to open life science roles utilizes your skills and experience. And if there's a role that we're working with, which is looking for those skills and experience, it'll be suggested to you as a role that you could either decide to apply to or not decide to apply to. But you do learn a little bit about the types of roles that are in industry that are available for you, maybe in sectors that you haven't considered yet, more of a business strategy and operations, more of a customer-facing roles, as well as research roles. But also, my side of the work is the kind of guide side, the educational initiatives. You're attending this workshop, but you might have attended the resume workshop, the LinkedIn workshop. Next week, you might be attending the interview prep workshop. And we typically record those, and those are available as videos on request at YouTube. We try to do follow-up resources from each event, summarizing the main points for you to utilize. If we have panelists for a panel event, like we had two bench to business roles in two bench to business panels in 2022 on non-bench roles in industry, we try to do follow-up interviews with the panelists to answer questions from the chat or for participants that we felt needed to be dived into a little bit more. And also I'm going to have Beth put a email in the chat, science@scismic.com, where if you have questions about industry, if you have questions about Scismic or the profile, there's the outreach associates available to help answer those questions, help with looking at your individual resumes, listening to some of the interview problems that you might be encountering, and seeing if we can help with those as well. It all comes down to, we want to try to help you find a role in industry and the right role in industry for you, whether it's through Scismic or not directly through Scismic. And all of these resources are always free for job seekers. The way that we make the money financially is the companies pay us. But what parts of your profile when you apply to a role actually get submitted to the hiring manager? Looking under the hood, what did they actually see? And this is an image of what they get sent based on what's pulled from your profile. We include minimal identifying information to begin with because we want to exclude some of the more biasing aspects, such as what university that someone went to and the things like that. We want to just have them decide whether they're interested in a candidate based on the skills, the fields of experience, and the answers to your application questions, which replace the cover letter. We do it this way because a lot of companies have admitted that they're moving away from reading to cover letters, but we also want you to be able to write a little bit of something personalized to the hiring manager. So we have them include questions of what they would like to know about the applicants. And so it takes the guesswork out of writing that kind of personal statement. You're answering a question they want the answer to, rather than writing a cover letter without any guidance. And I think Beth can attest to, they actually do read the answers to these questions. And we actually have had some hiring managers get really, really excited about interviewing an applicant primarily based on how well they answered the application questions. You also can always contact one of the outreach associates about the company that you might be interested in if there's information that you're missing that would help you make a decision on whether to apply or not. If you want some feedback on how your application went, or if you want to learn kind of at what stage your application is at, you can always reach out to someone. And it's that science outreach team which meets with the hiring managers about once a week to get that kind of feedback to then provide you if you want it. If you do decide to create a profile, there's two different options. They both go through the same portal, but you can either upload a resume, and through a parsing tool, it will pre-fill most of the sections for you. You can also choose to not include that and fill out the sections yourself. It does take about 15 minutes to complete. I'd say uploading the resume and having it pre-fill will reduce it to about 10 minutes. And then a little bit above the average, if you decide to fill everything in yourself, it might go up to about 20 minutes. We also recommend, if you haven't created a profile yet, or you've just gotten started and you haven't filled in the skills and fields, and you have some specific roles that you're interested in, reach out to either myself after the event or one of the outreach associates and tell us a little bit about the kinds of roles that you're looking for, because what we can do is we can look at current and past roles that are in that same area that you're looking at, and we can suggest what skills and fields based on your resume to add to match to more of those roles. And if you don't have any matches when you first complete your profile, we can also have a look and see if there's something that you could be matching to that you're not for some reason. So right now, you can select whether you're interested in an academic position, an industry position, or both. But I will say most of the roles we work with right now, the vast majority are heavily industry, biotech, biopharma, med tech roles. And so If you are looking for an industry role, we can provide a lot of guidance. If you're looking primarily for an academic role, we might not be able to offer a lot of help on the platform, but we're also happy to, if there's an interview question that you're really concerned about answering for an academic role, we're happy to be a sounding board for that as well, just to give you feedback on how well you're answering the question, how concise but direct you're being. And a little bit about industry, because I mentioned I'd throw in a couple kind of tidbits about industry that you can use offsite as well. Industry is kind of a broad term in that a lot of the questions that I get as well is working in government industry. It's a type of industry, is working in a hospital section, a hospital industry. It's not academia. And a lot of times what biotech, biopharma refers to when they say industry is colloquially very much business side of science, biotech, medtech, agtech, blue tech, and then the big biopharma companies. That's typically what they mean in jargon when they say industry or industry experience. If you do decide to create a profile, the most important part and the part that we can offer the most guidance in is the fields and skills sections. The idea is to be as comprehensive of your experience as possible. We recommend including at least 20 skills in 5 fields. Now you might think, well, I have a degree in a certain field, but I don't know if I can add 5 others. But the way industry looks at and reviews applicants is not necessarily what your degree says. You probably have dabbled in other areas that are adjacent to your field of expertise during the course of your project. For example, you're a cell biologist who has used cardiovascular cells for several projects. And so you've had to gather a lot of information on cardiovascular biology as well. In the case of Scismic and in the case of industry applications and thinking about what fields you could cover, you'd want to include both the cell biology and you would want to include the cardiovascular biology as well. Industry is not so much looking at what your main field of experience or your main top skill is versus the full picture of your fields of expertise and the skills that you can utilize. What you can come in and start contributing to on day one might not be an exact one-to-one mirror of what you were doing for your previous research project, but it might be close enough and have enough overlap that you are a strong candidate. Going off of the last example, you might have noticed that it's also tiered by a top skills section and an other skills section and a top field section and an other field section. You want to include ones that you're very, very proficient in and ones that you can do and that you've done, but you wouldn't consider your top skills, because if you're matching to roles only based on skills that you already know front and back, there's not really room for you to grow in a role. And this is, again, an industry insight when you're applying to roles. You don't necessarily need to apply to roles that are all the top skills they're looking for are all your top skills. Based on the qualifications, if there's skills that you are somewhat familiar with that they want, but they wouldn't be your primary skills, I would still say take a chance on applying for those roles off platform as well, because you don't want to limit yourself. I know that a lot of academic training, a lot of working with mentors or dissertation committees, we want to be very humble and we want to be very specific about what we're experts in and kind of downplay the things that we're not experts in. But for industry, you don't want to necessarily limit yourself in that way. The way we tend to say it is think about your top skills or your top fields as what you would feel comfortable teaching, and your other skills or other fields as things that you have done and that you've done, at least a couple times, you feel proficient enough to do it correctly again, but you wouldn't feel comfortable teaching it. And that's how I look at tiering your top skills or your other skills, whether you're using Scismic or whether you're looking at roles off site. You can include those other skills as well in your qualifications. What degrees you hold can also be really important as far as what roles you can apply to an industry, and then also what roles you can match to on Scismic. Research associate to associate scientist roles are pretty strictly bachelor's, master's level roles, and scientist roles are starting to accept some bachelor's, master's candidates with a lot of industry experience, but scientists and above does tend to be PhD and up. And so you want to include all of the degrees you hold on Scismic so that you're only getting suggested roles that are a good match for you. This is also why if you are currently in a PhD program and you don't anticipate that you're going to be job searching until you graduate, enter your PhD in the education section. I know that can be kind of difficult for us mentally to add when we don't technically have it yet. But by the time you're job seeking, you're going to be at PhD level, and you don't want to be getting recommended research associate, senior research associate roles that you're not going to get interviewed for just because of how the career ladder is structured in industry. They won't consider someone with a PhD because it's too junior. They won't pay you at a level that matches your degree qualifications. And that's just why they're so particular about it. I'd mentioned kind of the difference between industry and what that kind of colloquially means in biotech, but you want to be sure that you consider both your total years of experience and years of experience in industry. For example, a scientist role should accept a PhD with minimal years of experience, but a principal scientist role is probably going to be looking for a PhD with some years of industry experience along with total experience. If you're the same for a associate scientist role, probably looking for a bachelor's, master's with some industry experience, but a research associate role should be open to bachelor's, master's levels with minimal experience beyond that. You also want to include total years of experience when it's relevant. A kind of other industry insight is the way they count total years of experience. They don't typically consider work that was done in fulfillment of a degree program. I know that was really frustrating for me when I started looking because I had devoted 5.5 years to a PhD. I felt like I had earned those 5.5 years, but how they end up using that is the PhD does get you to a higher career ladder, but they don't count that as total years of experience. Total years of experience is years that are outside of the degree program. So if you have a master's, you can't necessarily count the years of research that was in fulfillment of your master's thesis. But if you stay on in the lab as a lab member for a year or join another lab who assists them with research as another year post graduation, you can count that as a year of total experience. They don't count PhD years, but they do count postdoc years. So if you're in a postdoc, you do want to count all of your years as a postdoc towards your years of total experience and look at roles that match that. And for Scismic, we only do whole numbers. So if you have gone above the whole number, if you have like 2.5 years experience post degree, just round it up to 3. It's completely okay because a lot of roles will consider the requested total years of experience plus or minus 2 years. So you don't need to also, if you're looking for roles offsite, if they're looking for 3 years experience and you only have 2, still apply because that's within the range that they're probably looking at. They've just picked a total years of experience as a benchmark, but they're likely flexible by a couple of years either direction. And I know with uploading your resume to pre-fill, there'd be concerns about who else might see your resume, but we don't share any of your information, whether on your profile or on your resume, with roles that you're not interested in. So we won't send any of the information over for a role that you haven't told us either through email that you want to apply to, or through the matches section where you can either view and apply or pass on a role. If you pass on a role, those companies never receive your information. Say, for example, that you're matching to these two roles, but you're really interested in a research role. And so maybe skills wise and fields wise, Scismic is saying you could do this role, and you probably could do this role, but it's not something that you would be excited about getting up and doing every day for a couple of years. And so you can always pass on those and wait for the research associate, the research scientist roles instead. For the application questions, I mentioned that they're important because they replace the cover letter, and we really encourage the hiring managers we work with to read them and take them into consideration, especially because they write them. They should be reading answers to questions that they write. In formulating the answers to the questions, you'll also get a company profile, which will tell you all about the products the company's working on, where they're located, their size, and their mission and values. This can help you decide not only whether the company is not only a good match research-wise for you, but is a good match environment-wise, whether they're someone that you would even be interested in talking to about a potential role. You can also use those to answer the application questions, because you'll know a little bit about what they're likely to care about, what they're likely looking for in an applicant, and what they're excited about, and what kind of mutual excitement about a product or service they would be looking for in an applicant. Just want to double check that we are on time. So I'm actually going to play really quick this walkthrough, because I know I've hit some of the other sections, but there's a couple other points. I want to make sure. So you saw screenshots of this, but this is what the full profile page looks like. You can go to edit your basic information, and you can go and change this at any time. Those edit buttons are still there. When you're entering what kind of roles you would consider, try to include all of the ones that you would be open to potentially. Maybe you really are looking at research and development, but you potentially consider science communication. You're a little bit curious about what kind of roles there are. Include both of those as ones you would consider. And so once you get the basic identifying information in, here's where you'll be able to enter the skills and fields. You'll notice the blue and red arrows. Essentially, you select all of the ones one by one that apply to you, and the blue arrows will move them over. If you accidentally add one that you didn't mean to, you can use the red arrow by selecting it and clicking the red arrow to move it back. And you can add ones that are kind of parent or umbrella terms and child terms. So you can include cell assays, in vitro assays, but then include more specific things like the T cell assays, T cell isolation. You start typing something in, we probably have it. You do want to enter, as I mentioned, all of the degree fields. We also have roles that occasionally, technician roles or manufacturing roles that are not, they don't require a degree. And so even if you don't have a degree, you can also have a section where you skip this part, but you do want to include all the ones that you have. You also want to be as open as possible to the roles that you would consider, because maybe you're primarily looking in Massachusetts, but say you would also consider a role in New York. You can add extra sections, or you can just leave it at essentially any country, any state, any city. And if you require sponsorship, you want to fill all of the sections. For example, if you're eligible for OPT, we want to be able to consider that in your application as well. And so make sure that as you're filling that out, you're not missing any of the drop-down options. After you complete it, if you don't receive any matches in, say, the first 24 hours, reach out to us and we can help you edit it, learn a little bit more about the kinds of roles that you're looking for. And if we have open roles that you could match to, we're happy to help you match those and apply. You can also, if you don't want to receive the match emails, toggle this off and we won't send you any notifications for every match.